Please serve. Sure.
Andreas has informed us that the supervisor is running a couple minutes behind, so as soon as he gets here, we'll definitely bring him up. But since everyone's here, we want to kind of get started with the talk, kind of giving you an update as to what we've been working on and kind of the status of our investigation and kind of what the next steps are there. And we thought that this is kind of an appropriate time. We talked with Supervisor Wiener and also the mayor's office about where we were in kind of our technical analysis. And thought this would be a good opportunity to kind of give you all an update as far as the progress we've made. And also, when the mayor and supervisor came out to the area, it was about trying to give you a baseline of what's happening within Cayuga. And so I think that foundational knowledge is also what we're hoping to set, so you understand what some of the challenges are within this area that is currently flooding and how we're approaching and how we're dealing with it. So my name is Tyrone Jew. I'm the Communications Director for the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission. Joined here by several of my colleagues. We have Gene Walsh, also part of the team, Ari Frink, we have Saeed Louie, part of our infrastructure group, our Assistant General Manager of Infrastructure, who's going to be talking a little bit more on the technical side of things that are going on. Of course, we have Andreas here representing Supervisor Wiener's office. So I know it's somewhat strange kind of having this talk about flooding and the flooding that occurred in your area, given that we're in a drought right now. But I think that's part of what we're seeing within the changing climate of just storm intensity. And that's really kind of what's the issue right now, is that not that we're not getting enough rain, but it's that when we're getting rain, we're seeing very intense, very like big deluges of water in short periods of time, which is causing parts of the sewer system, especially those low-lying areas like Cayuga, to get overwhelmed. So we're going to go over a couple of things in this presentation. First, I'm just going to give you a little background on how the sewer system currently works and some of the challenges that we're facing. Then we're going to transition over to Kathy to kind of give you a little bit more of a technical explanation of how water is flowing within this watershed that you live in. And we'll kind of explain what these watersheds are and so how the water is kind of draining. What sort of analysis we're looking at specifically along the Cayuga area as far as what we're looking at right now, and you'll see that they're not easy solutions, and they're pretty complex solutions. And then we'll go over some of those proposals, and then we'll go over kind of the next steps and ways we're going to continue to work through this process. But none of these solutions are going to be, and I preface this now, they're not going to be the solutions as well. The Public Utilities Commission is the agency responsible for the operations and management of the sewer system. And of course, all of you know that we also deal with the drinking water system and municipal power. But all in all, we have about 1,000 miles of sewer pipeline that cross every single city street. We have 2 24-hour treatment plants that are treating water and a 3rd wet weather facility. So on a normal day, we're treating about 70 million gallons of sanitary sewage a day, so a day like today when it isn't raining. When it does rain, the system actually treats about 500 million gallons of combined stormwater and sanitary flow. Some of the challenges we're dealing with right now are along these fronts. We have obviously a very old system with San Francisco being an old city. We have sewers dating back all the way to the gold rush, and of course we're working as fast as we can on a repair and replacement program to replace those. Seismic reliability, making sure that our facilities are in good standing order so that when we do have an earthquake, when it does happen, that we're able to resume service without interruption to homes and businesses. Combined sewer discharges, and then of course stormwater management, which is kind of the focus of what our talk is today. So here's what happened in December of 2014. The system is designed to carry a certain amount of flow in it. In this case, the engineers call it a 5-year storm criteria. So it's really just a probability of how much water is going to be flowing within the system for a given period of time, and what the probability is of that occurring. What we saw on, I think this is December 3rd storm?
Yeah.
So the December 3rd storm, we saw a lot of water, and everyone remembers the storm from that day especially. We had a 25-year storm, and what that means is there was just a lot of water that fell within a very short window of time, overwhelming not only the sewers over in the Cayuga watershed, but sewer systems throughout the entire city. There were manholes that were popping open because of the amount of water and pressure that were flowing through. And we had significant flooding in other areas in the city besides Cayuga. These are 2 other areas of the city which experienced flooding during the December rainstorms. 17th and Folsom is an area where we repeatedly see flooding, where the amount of stormwater flow gathering within that area is greater than the system can convey out of there, and so this is what results. And we also had flooding over at 15th and Walnut. So now that we kind of laid the context of just the overall system and how it's functioning, I'm going to transition over to Kathy. She's going to give you kind of a walkthrough in time, basically, of what this area used to look like before, how the water is flowing through it, what area it's collecting, and what the watershed is made of, and why we're seeing the challenges we are facing today, and then some of the next proposed concepts.
So until the early 1900s, the water flowed from the tributaries in Upper Glen Canyon and Outer Mission to Islas Creek and flowed through the neighborhood surrounding Cayuga. This slide shows, okay, so this slide shows how Islas Creek's original flow pattern to the bay has been obstructed by the fill and baby. And this slide basically shows before and then after the construction of I-280. And so the construction of I-280 embankment in the early 1960s at the end of Cayuga basically blocked the flow from continuing to the east of Mission. The highest reaches of the drainage area just south of Twin Peaks are among some of the highest elevations. And so these, as well as High Point in Clarence Park and the Excelsior, form a classic valley where Cayuga runs along the bottom about 700 feet below some of the highest points. And so this just shows why flooding occurs. And so there are hydrologic and hydraulic factors that contribute to the flood area. The local topography. Cayuga and the vicinity form a natural low-lying area where historically the Glen Canyon tributary merged with the rest of Islas Creek. These creeks were all connected into the sewer system. In the collection system is at capacity. Stormwater accumulates on the street in these low-lying areas. The natural drainage that has been available in the past is basically obstructed by the freeway construction. Rainfall and runoff from the drainage basin, about 2,800 acre-feet contributing runoff to the vicinity of the flood-prone Cayuga Avenue is steep and highly urbanized. Rainfall falling on the drainage area turns to runoff almost immediately because of the urbanization and enters the combined sewer system and is conveyed to points downstream. The time it takes for the flow to travel from the upper drainage reaches to the foot of Cayuga at 280 is really short. The large drainage basin combined with the steep terrain can lead to significant flow in the collection system in a very short amount of time during large storms and even short storms with high rainfall intensity. The present sewer system is not capable of carrying the extreme flows that happen in a short amount of time. So here you just see the sewer system that's at the foot of Cayuga. There are 3 major sewer drains that catch the surface flow. There is trunk sewer number 1, which carries sewer from Diamond Heights, Glen Park, and Bosworth. And then trunk sewer 2 carries southern and western drainage and Cayuga Street flow. And then trunk 3 carries all the eastern side and it is under Alameda Boulevard. And so what's been done is that a new 9-foot diameter sewer was built in the 1980s, as well as a 36-inch bypass or overflow connection from the 9-foot Cayuga sewers to an existing College Hill tunnel in 2007. But even with this, they all still merge at the end into a 10-foot sewer, and so there's still not enough capacity.
Excuse me, where is that 10-foot sewer? That's at the end of Cayuga?
That's the arrow, that's after
passes actually off this slide.
So can you just show how all the everything comes together? So we have 1, 2, just making sure it's white on the map so people can see.
What diameter is the tube under Cayuga?
That's under Cayuga is 9 feet.
9 feet?
Right. 2 is 9 feet. 3 is a smaller, but then Alamany, the auxiliary one, which shows in 1985, that's another 9 feet. But they all exit the whole area into 10 foot at the end.
Can I?
At the end of
where is-
Alamany?
At the end of where?
No, past under
You can just actually
yes,
point-
at the end
just
of
Somebody
point to it.
goes there.
Point it out.
right that arrow.
Can I suggest something? The maps from the sewer show that it's a 9 foot under there, but there's a box divided in 2, and each of those 2 is 10 feet by 6 feet that go under the freeway.
Right.
So the capacity under the freeway is greater
Yes.
than the 9 foot. So I'm trying to understand why you say the construction of 280 is the problem if they gave us the capacity to move all of the water. Where does the backup begin? If the water flows under the freeway and it has the capacity to carry all of this, where does the backup actually begin?
It has the capacity to move the water in regular sort of like days like today, and we call it 5-year level of services storm. However, when it's like 25 years old.
No, what I'm asking is, I'll cut to the chase. Down there at 400 Alamany at Folsom, the sewer is about 2/3 as big as it is under the freeway. I'm suggesting to you that this is true, but that the problem isn't 280, because they have the capacity to move all of this water. The problem is down at 400 Alamany, where the sewer is seriously constricted. That's the bottleneck.
And actually, I don't think we're saying that 280 is the cause of all the problems, actually.
You said it 3 times.
You've been
If we
saying
jump
it.
back, I mean, the major issue is it's the amount of water that's being drained in, coming in through the sewer at any given time, right? So you're right, this trunk line over here is larger in terms of capacity as far as those 9 foot diameter tunnels. Still, that's rated to take a certain amount of flow, which is that 5-year storm that we had talked about earlier. So anytime you get a storm that's greater than that 5-year storm, or you get more rainfall that's being contributed, that's not enough still.
So even a 10 foot is not
No,
large
what I'm
enough.
suggesting is that the bottleneck isn't there, the bottleneck is further down. I'd like you to address that question. But I can wait until later if you really want to address that question.
Why don't we just keep going to the presentation?
Could I just throw in a simple question?
Sure.
That 36-inch overflow bypass, which direction does it go?
It's connected to College Hill Tunnel.
Yeah, but which way is the flow?
Downhill,
It's
right?
going down the other side. It's not
So
Going down
away
now.
from Cayuga?
Yeah.
What is
Okay.
No,
So wait.
What,
Yes.
and sorry, and mine's simple too. What street is that? Where number 1 is?
It's Lyle.
Lyle.
Or,
Lyle.
Oh,
that's Lyle. Okay.
Yeah, we can talk about the sewer. We have our folks here that are more familiar with.
And so then, I just wanted to show you a simulation of how quickly it can rise in level.
Yeah, these are the legends for the darker means at 12-inch and more water. This is an extreme condition simulation, the computer simulation.
Its intensity, inches per hour.
No, these are good.
No, these are the,
It's gonna be a color, the next slide is probably gonna have the colors.
Well, it's gonna have the shades
Yeah, yeah.
representing the depth of the water.
The 5-year rainfall, it averages to be 0.72 inches per hour. So 25-year would be somewhere less than 1 inch per hour. If you take whole 1 hour duration, I don't have the exact number in my head,
at
but
the extreme of the within.
yeah.
Well, I'd like to put in, I think if we're going to continue this dialogue going forward here, what I observe over more than 35 years of watching these is that, in San Francisco, it can rain like 20 hours straight. and you don't flood. The Russian River floods, but we don't flood. What I see in the Mission District is periodically we get a storm cell that parks itself over Twin Peaks and it dumps a heck of a lot faster than 0.7 of an inch, an hour. I would say maybe 2 inches an hour. And it does it for 20 minutes, and that's enough to flood us at 17th Street. So I wonder is there a different way to this, it doesn't matter how many hours it rains for, what happens in 20 minutes. And that's when we get a flood.
Flash flood.
Yeah. Do you have numbers for that?
On that map, it showed 20 minutes. Based on that 20 minutes, we determined the December 3rd rain, the flood, or the storm was 25 here. You see it says 20 minutes. That's the closest rain gauge, right by the star.
Show me. 20
minutes.
Here, 20 minutes.
Based on this, and some of it is measured different based on different
How many
intervals.
How many inches of water?
I gotta pull the
Inches, I understand.
we have those.
You have those
results of
numbers.
all
Okay,
these
'cause
gauges.
I think that's what we should be
I
talking
have
about.
the number. I was just looking online the other day. The flooding happened twice, December 3rd and December 11th, and I know because I was one of the unfortunate victims, so whatever. But that day, the first rain, it was 2.96 inches for the entire rain.
24 hours?
Yeah, from 10 p.m. to 10 a.m. They're saying, and then December 11 is a lot smaller, but it flooded too. It's 2.36 inches.
Right.
So I'm trying to figure out why it flooded twice, whereas the second flooding was less rain.
Yeah, and it actually, it gets depicted on this map because even storms aren't uniform across the city. And so even when you look at what happened this December 3rd, we had a 25-year storm here. Well, up in the Seacliff area, there was only a 2-year storm. There was less intensity. So it isn't. So when you look at the total amount of rainfall that fell within the city, that isn't necessarily going to be an exact indicator of which areas are going to flood, because you can have one cell that just parks, like this gentleman said, right over Twin Peaks, which contributes to the flow in this watershed. And so, but that's also part of the complexity of the analysis that we're looking at right now, that we're going to go over.
So we can keep it in will. I think we can pass around the simulation. We got folks who signed up on the sign-in sheet, but let's get back to where we were.
So we have a question. What do you guys mean by 25-year, 5-year?
25-year, 20 meters. What does
Those are
that mean?
the probability
It's
of
not a
that kind
fact,
of rain.
or is it probability, or is it a fact?
No, because we've had 3 flooding
Well,
in less than
We have to
25
somehow
years.
designate it, similar to earthquakes, for example. These are the probabilities of, means that each year, when it's 5 years, each year you have 20% probability or chance of getting these kind of rains. Then we have, based on facts, we have tables of, if it is within this many minutes, this many inches, it's called 5-year or 25-year. We compare what is happening to the database we have. That's how we say, okay, it was closest to 25 years.
The higher the number of years, the more intense, the more rain you're going to get.
But that so you're saying that the December 3rd was a 25-year, and then the December 11th a 5. Are you telling me that those happened 2 times in
Yes.
1 week?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Is that according to according to I mean, where's the
Because the
data
20
coming from? Is that
25
from?
years
According
is
to
the
those
long-term
same
average.
rain gauges that we.
I saw our group in the neighborhood, 30 years, I've seen worse rain than this.
It just seems to me that that's what this is where it's heading. Is the city's going to say, oh, because it's a 25-year storm or a 5-year storm, we're not responsible for fixing this. It's very frustrating. I'm sorry, but it really is.
And it's all really
Really very interesting, but I just heard the speaker say the present sewer system is not capable of capturing the flow.
Correct.
And we want to know, what will it take for you to fix the sewer so it will become
Yeah, so
more
let us continue on,
actual
we're going to get to the next one.
Maybe we can sort of jump to that, because
It's going to be hard.
better simulations, we actually have film of what happened.
Right.
So this is one potential concept that has been discussed, and it's having detention tanks upstream and downstream of Cayuga. The issue with this is that it's no matter how many tanks we put there, it's still not gonna take care of all of the flooding. Because, again, we designed for a 5-year storm, not a 25 or 35, 50-year storm.
What does a detention tank do?
It basically takes some of that rainwater so that the flow can go through the sewer, and it holds it until the sewer can.
Are you saying you don't have engineers on staff who can design and solve this engineering problem?
Of course we do, but it's not that simple a solution, is what I'm saying. There's land issues here, being able to find the property to go and put in these tanks as well.
How about under 280?
That involves
Free
talking
land.
to Caltrans, and so, you know.
Have talks
$2 million
begun with
and it's something we
Caltrans?
don't know.
Have talks begun with Caltrans at this point?
No, they have not, because we're still
Okay.
looking at other concepts as well.
Got it.
The issue is one tank wouldn't resolve it, because we're looking at 10 million gallons of storage. I mean, basically, it gotta be multiple, and then the issue of cost is enormous. It's not, you know, it's not just fixing sewers. We're talking about a lot of capacity, storage we need.
So what do you guys think would fix it?
So here is another possible concept. We talked about diversion of the former creek water from the combined sewer system, because right now the creek water is going into the sewer system as well. And again, the challenge here is land and easement acquisition and cost.
Could you clarify if, you said the diversion of former creek water, is the creek still active at this point?
Yes,
Yes.
it is.
It is,
Yeah.
okay.
It's just
It's
underground.
right on the
Okay.
Cayuga.
It's under my
And
backyard.
it's running in the water is actually diverted right into the sewer lane.
Got it. Okay.
Goes right there.
This is another concept.
Hey, ground zero.
Creating at the foot of Cayuga and 280 and connecting the overflow to College Hill Tunnel. And we would have to coordinate with multiple agencies.
Excuse me. So that's the end of Cayuga,
You
right?
need to speak
Yeah.
out this way, because when you're facing the board.
Okay,
it's
so this
really
is a third
I'm sorry.
concept that basically would tie Cayuga with I-280 so that the water can flow toward College Hill Tunnel.
Yeah, well, I live on that block.
Yeah,
There's
we
this
live
lady,
in
and
that
so
block.
A bunch of us, and we know what that water flow is during the storm, or during the flood. It was up to my chest.
Oh, yeah.
And that's why quite a few of us are here because of that. And that's that block.
Right, and so we're talking about opening up and getting rid of that berm or that hill so that the water would flow
Okay,
through.
that'd be fine.
So it gives a little bit more space for spreading. It could be effective bringing that depth at the end down, but again, on its own, this is probably the least effective for the upstream floods. Means that if you're a block off, this wouldn't help you as much.
Okay.
So again, you're showing the complexity of just, it's not one solution basically. One thing wouldn't resolve it.
Do we know if the flooding was caused by an overload of the sewage system or the inability for the mass amount of water to get into the sewer system? Because after the storm was over, all the storm drains within a 100-yard radius of my house were totally clogged. So, I mean, has that been studied?
We looked at it, yeah.
You know, because if the water can't get into the sewer, it just stays on top of the street, you know, it's gonna find its way into the people's houses,
I mean, there
right?
was, we saw that video, there was a geyser of water coming out of the sewer, so the water was coming out of the sewer.
Right,
Oh,
right.
yeah, we saw about 8 of them just from my
I mean, all I'm saying is
porch.
I went out and cleared like 8 storm drains right around my house, and we're all completely clogged with plastic bags and all sorts of
Clearing
trash.
the catch basins so that water can get in there. That's another thing that is being storm preparation and making sure the catch basins are clear.
I just want to put this up there, no more talking about sandbags because they don't work.
Yes.
They don't. It's not a solution. It's not a
Yes.
solution.
The other thing is that our PUC also has a grant program for flood barriers and backflow preventers, and so we're working on that grant program so that.
But they cost about $8,000 to install, and the grant's only for $2,000.
So that's why we're looking at modifying that grant.
I have one more thing to
We're
say.
working on that right now.
I'm sorry. That house there with the bush out in front, the big one,
Yes.
next to the greenhouse, that's my house. And the water was that high. So when I say it was up to my chest, I wasn't kidding, it was that high. So that means everybody who was on that block and across the street, and I really don't know about the block before us, their bottom apartments or houses that.
And any of the cars that were parked in the garage is pretty much totaled for the second time this time around.
And the ones that were parked on the street.
And the street.
In the street. How many cars was total?
So is there another?
Okay, so the,
3 cars total.
Is there another?
In our house.
so basically, we're almost done. We'll open up.
Oh.
Yay, sandbags!
That's y'all's best idea.
Sandbags.
Remember, so we're dealing with the kind of the interim solutions that we have and challenges that we have, knowing that you see how large these detentions are, the land acquisitions that's necessary to do some of those larger projects, and we're going to continue working along that front. But we have to have some short-term measures, and it's going to take kind of us working together on these things. So things like monitoring clogged catch basins, just like we talked about. Sometimes those catch basins get clogged. We're going to go out there definitely before the storm. We're going to be out there during the storm to see if we can clear any blockages. But anything you can do to relieve any blockages from the catch basins that you see is going to be helpful. We are making modifications to the grant program to try to provide for additional money for barriers and such in place of the sandbags. There's more of a permanent solution, and so we're working through that right now. Elevating belongings, weather alerts, as far as just, we're going to set up an email distribution just to kind of give you as much advance warning as we can, as we know when severe storms are coming. Definitely call 311 to report anything. And the last piece is really, as we've been talking about kind of the challenges, right? We can design our system we can engineer our system with enough money up to a certain standard. We can engineer our system up to a 25-year storm to handle what happened on December 3rd. But that doesn't mean that a year later, 5 years later, that there's going to be a 26, 27, or even a 100-year storm that overwhelms the system. And the challenge that we face here, when we saw the topography, this is the lowest point in this entire watershed where water gravitates. And we can't change the overall topography of the city no matter what we do. And so the policies that we're trying to set up is so that we're not coming back saying, we're going to take care of every single storm, because we would all be lying to you if we said we could take care of every single storm. Just like any person would be lying to you saying they could take care of every single natural disaster. We can design buildings up to a certain seismic code, but that doesn't mean that there isn't going to be a greater earthquake larger than that seismic code that we're designing to. And so the policies that we're trying to set up, not just for Cayuga, but for all of those areas that are flooding around the city, are about trying to elevate. We know there's an issue in these low-lying areas. We're going to take action working with the supervisor's office and the mayor's office to try to figure out what we specifically are going to design these sewer systems for. But we don't want to give the false expectation that that's it. You'll never see flooding, and we don't want to give that expectation, but we do want to be there to try to help and mitigate what's happening there right now. And so next step is we're looking at all of this technical analysis that we're working through right now. We're going to come back as we have more refined projects and specific ideas of, where are we going to site these detention basins? Where are they going to go? Where is there available land and space that we can build these type of facilities? Where are we going to need to perhaps enlarge sewer pipes in different locations to help? Where are we going to be trying to minimize the upstream flow so there isn't as much contributing flow coming down to this area? That's all kind of the analysis that needs to take place, because we also can't shift the burden that's happening here onto another area. So we don't want to cause another problem somewhere downstream, which is...
Are you saying you don't already have those answers?
I'm saying that we haven't completed all of the analysis yet.
I have a question then. I've been looking at your documents online, and I'm curious about what happened to the sewer system master plan. Many of those documents refer to Alamany and Cayuga and the issues in those areas. But all of a sudden, those dropped off the plans, and now we have the sewer system improvement program, which is all about greening and greenwashing and that sort of stuff. no mention of the Cayuga or the Alamany sewer improvement projects. Why is that happening?
And actually, that's a good point and a good segue. We, as part of the sewer system improvement program, there is an urban watershed assessment where we're doing this kind of analysis, where we're saying, where are the areas of the city that don't meet kind of the level of service that we're trying to hit with that storm criteria. But also, again, we need to think even bigger than just what our current sewer system is designed for, because we know that all of a sudden these more intense storms are coming. And so having a higher policy for these areas like Cayuga, like 17th and Folsom, like 15th and Wawona, where they're going to be the first places overwhelmed anytime you have anything greater than that 5-year storm. That's the kind of criteria where we need to be able to set a higher standard, and we're working on what that higher standard
Why did those projects drop off of the master plan and not, where did they go? Why were they mentioned in the master plan but not in the SSIP?
And I think this is actually a good way of what we realize is we can't deal with everything in terms of pipe solutions. And I think this has been the big change in philosophy, which I think is going to be beneficial in the long run for the city. When we're looking at the contributing flow, the previous philosophy when you design systems and sewer systems was build as large a diameter pipeline as you can, convey as much water as you can, and call it a day. We know that that philosophy doesn't work exactly, because we have to understand how much water is flowing from all of these different sources throughout this entire watershed to see what we can do upstream of that to minimize those peak intensities, to prevent and give the sewer system a little bit more breathing room to convey that water. And so we took that step back approach to look at the whole watershed instead of just saying, let's just design one fix for Cayuga, because we can then provide multiple benefits for everywhere else.
But if you already know where the bottleneck is, why don't you fix the bottleneck?
Amen.
And that's what we're analyzing and doing right now. And so
by not fixing it, you're saying that it's actually okay to have sewage running through the streets and up into people's homes.
Right.
Does
Yes.
the city actually think that's okay?
Where kids and elderly have not had heat because their furnaces have been submerged under raw sewage for the past 6 months.
So again, I can't really say anything about that, because as much as we want to solve this problem today, and if there was an easy solution to solve this problem, we would have done it already.
I think you've already had like 10 years. We had to start the same kind of flooding, just as high as I said, 10 years ago. And nothing has been done on Cayuga that I know of. If something has, I would like to know about it. But I never saw them building anything, like a bigger sewer pipe or whatever you want to call it down there at that end, that picture that you showed. And the same thing happened, just as high. And we had 2 that year, 10 years ago, and we had 2 this time. And the second one was just as bad as the first one. Only the first one, of course, hit us all by surprise.
And the project we did do within that 10-year frame was that auxiliary connector to provide additional relief and flow for the Cayuga sewer. So that was a project that was done within that.
It was?
It
Where?
seemed to make it worse.
It was in 2007.
I'm sorry?
It was in 2007.
Where?
Go back.
That was back in Sanders. Although it was just a small
Right.
relief.
It's a small
It
relief,
wasn't
like,
really.
it's a small relief as we were trying to determine what the larger fix is.
Where was it done?
So this connector bypass right there is that 36.
And where does that eventually flow to?
It's a College Hill tunnel.
And where does that go?
Eventually, everything goes over
south.
towards the bay to our treatment plant.
By way of, comes through
Cesar Chavez.
Chavez and,
Oh, the storage box. Goes to
The line that comes down Lyell, when you have labeled 1, it looks like that's actually 2 lines. If I'm reading your diagram correctly, it looks like 2 of them coming together. And wouldn't it? Well, up at the top it's split, so it looks like it might be 2 separate ones.
It's just one major line. You could,
Or is it just one major line? But it seems like just diverting that line on the other side of 280 somewhere would help a lot.
So over the last 4 months, this is what you guys have basically come up with? This is your analysis, and then you're basically telling us that you have more analysis to do.
Yeah,
Can you-
we have to do more calculations to
Do you know
determine.
what happened on December 3rd? Like, was, do you know it was because there was a bottleneck at a certain point, or are you just saying
They're
that
saying
simply
it's a
there's?
25-year flood, so.
But what does that mean though? It just means it's, what does that
It was
mean?
more than the sewers were designed to handle.
And that's basically what happened is, there was more rain within that period of time than the sewers
Could handle.
And so the water, because it had nowhere to go throughout the entire network of sewers,
So-
went to the lowest point. The water just went down.
And with this analysis you guys have done, have you guys been able to say, right, okay, we're gonna do this analysis, and somebody up above you said, yeah, we'll fund it? Is there active funding
Yeah,
for it?
and that's the next step, is to determine that level, right? Because remember, is a 10-year storm enough? Is a 25-year storm enough?
But we don't care about the year storms, really, there's a problem and the solution, so let's just talk about, here's the problem, and if you guys can say, here's how we're gonna fix it, that would really help our anxiety, because it sounds like you guys are just really throwing some stuff up there, and really, we don't care that much about the year storm. So that it's really, if there's a problem, solution, and it costs $100 million, and you guys should be able to tell us, we, over the last 4 months, we have a couple of solutions, and here's what we think is gonna work, and this is what we've got to prove for the budget. It should be that simple to tell us that.
That'll be definitely the next meeting where we're gonna actually tie together. So we're gonna, remember, it's not just one detention tank that's gonna solve it. It's gonna be a combination of all of these different types of projects. And we're outlining like how much water does each one of these divert away from this area. So we can kind of come up with that menu, and then associated with that will be kind of the price tag, and then showing you like, again, that storm would have handled, for example, would it have handled the December 3rd storm?
I'm actually just curious, how many times per year or per given year is the system actually tested? I mean, it seems like it's more reactive than proactive at this point, where you understand that there is topography, there is an active creek, and yes, there is weather changes that's going on. With climate change, or whoever wants to argue with that, I really don't care. But critically, we have more rainfall. So why is it that something as dire as this needs to happen before we can actually take a look at the system as a whole, and not get it to a point where, oh my gosh, it's exasperatingly expensive to find a solution, instead of, hey, we can just chip at it, maybe put in a couple thousand here, a couple thousand there, and really spread out the budget. Like, I just don't understand why it's more reactive than proactive.
So I mean, I think some of the historical photos that we saw earlier, the sewer
Which we all
system
understand,
for this area
yes.
was designed in the 1930s.
Mhm.
So we're dealing a lot with the infrastructure that
So
was
since the
already in place.
1930s, haven't we been knowing about this information? I mean, it's what, 2015, if correct me if I'm wrong. But since then, we've known certain factors. So why has it just been now, or 10 years ago, that we've actually taken a good look at it?
Has it been confirmed that it wasn't a maintenance issue rather than the storm being overwhelmed?
Yes. Because we're going over there, and this is part of what we do kind of pre-storm, is that pre-storm sweep of all of these areas, especially these low-lying areas. We have teams that go out there to just kind of inspect the catch basins, make sure they're clear. We have routine kind of in sewer lines inspection.
Because I have doing ours, and the guy came out for a drain.
I mean, and that's the challenge, is that when you get severe storms, everything
That's what
washes into those catch basins. So even if they're clear, we try to make them clear so that they can flow as freely as possible. And so if you see something like, we have reports of trash bags, for example, covering catch basins that end up flooding intersections just because the water has nowhere to go.
Well, Guy Phillips' our drain was clear. It wasn't even a rainy day. It rained just a week ago, and it flooded. So he said it was clear, and they came back out, and it wasn't clear. So I don't know what you guys do when they're out there, but obviously maybe they need to be retrained, or they need cameras, because the guys who come out don't have cameras, and they're shooting their power washers through, and they're going, it clears it, and then I ran my water, and it flooded right there, right in front of them. It was, wow, stop. Maybe you need to get more equipment for these guys. It sounds like
Cameras are a big help.
and they don't all have it. There's only 3 guys who are shooting the water through, saying it's clear. And he said, oh, it should be good. It's clearing down at the water basin thing. I turn on my water, back right up. So it's not working what they're doing, just so you know.
Okay, well, maybe I can get your address later on to figure out what happened specifically.
And that might be the easiest solution right now, is to make sure that maintenance is happening, that we are getting the capacity that was designed, less than.
Definitely, that's one of the lowest hanging fruit that we're definitely focused on, is making sure that the sewers are as clean as possible prior to any kind of heavy rain. I don't know. Supervisor.
So if I understand you right, you're saying there's a localized constriction down at the end of Cayuga. Have you considered putting a pump station and a force main to go around it?
You know, we have looked at kind of just what it would take to enlarge the sewer line. So remember, your constriction.
I didn't say a gravity sewer, I said a pump station and a force main.
Right. But the water still has to have somewhere to go. So you have to have somewhere to
Well, you're
pump it.
saying it's a localized constriction. So if you can get around the constriction with a pump, that might be a solution.
It's not localized. I
Okay,
mean, that unfortunately the YouTube clip that we had doesn't work. It would show you that how the water flows, and as the sewer get filled, everything goes up with the colors, and that's why that end of freeway berm only can help that end block. Because on its way, I mean, all the other upstream going to get flooded.
You've modeled this, and
yes,
you've done your hydraulic grade lines, and it's popping up all along the line. It's not a localized constriction.
You're saying there's no bottleneck at Alamany and Folsom?
Or it becomes a bottleneck, but before that it gets to there are floodings throughout.
If there weren't a bottleneck, would it still flood?
It would flood, but probably, I mean, it would flood, but probably the depth going to be less.
So if you deal with the question, maybe an auxiliary sewer down there on Alamany Avenue from 400 Folsom down towards Evans, and you do the other improvements. I mean, I look at this and I say to myself, God, we pay sewer, we pay for water, we pay for bonds. What's the inclination for any members, any of the people here, to ever vote for a bond measure if it just means that more and more buildings are going to be built, increasing the capacity, getting exemptions for not being able to deal with it on site, and then it just comes down here and does the same thing again and again. And I'd also like to point out, you were talking, Emilio Cruz did this at the hearing at City Hall, global warming. Emilio isn't the spokesperson anymore, right? No. So Emilio was going on about global warming, and you suggested it. If the rainwater is ½ an inch in Seacliff, but it's 2½ inches in our neighborhood, that isn't evidence of global warming. That's a big storm. And if we built all of this other capacity along the beach, underneath the Great Highway, and from the Fisherman's Wharf leading all the way around to Evans, that's an engineering solution. But the money was there. And other people, if they have a big storm, they don't have this flooding. And this area is about 100 feet above sea level. This is an engineering question. It's not 15th and Wawona. It's not 17th and Folsom. God bless them. They deserve respect too. So my question is, how are you going to be accountable for us in terms of your research? Is there going to be a process when you're doing it that you refer back to us before you issue papers so that people can look over your shoulder and say, no?
Absolutely. So we said that for the next meeting that we'll come back, we're going to have more detailed analysis outlining kind of the specific suite of projects that we're looking at, what each of those projects will kind of take as far as stormwater, how that will help the area, and the cost tag that's assigned to each one of those projects. And that's the next step that we're going to come back to everyone with.
Years.
And so our goal is actually to try to come back before the
Before the rainy season?
August, September. We will come back and convene everyone back in for another meeting, give you more information about kind of the project and the timetable and stuff like that.
What is the importance of maintaining like open green spaces as far as like mitigating these type of flooding concerns?
That's definitely a part of the solution. I mean, we're looking at more green infrastructure trying to manage that stormwater flow.
Save the farm at that point.
Here, simply just having enough green space probably isn't going to be enough by itself.
Okay, but I mean, more development is, you know, more development over existing green space is not really, it would be counterproductive.
Yeah, and one of the things that we implemented on the books about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, is a stormwater ordinance. So any of those new developments actually have to manage a significant portion of the stormwater flow from those developments on site there, so they're not contributing more stormwater to the sewer system. So that's a change that we have.
All right, thanks.
All right, thank you everyone, and we'll definitely let you know when we are scheduling the next meeting.